Legion! Oh, not the Henry Legion!
Welcome to the virtual towers of Binary Arcadia, where the games go on long into the night. Today's video is a review. We've got a couple of these. They're like buses, two coming at once on the cards. This one is Astral Chain for the Nintendo Switch, a game that caused a lot of buzz and early excitement in the reveal and some of the subsequent videos. And, you know, if you've not got time to watch this whole review, I would say, broadly speaking, it lives up to that hype and excitement and is definitely got a lot of promise as a future franchise. But let's get stuck in to my thoughts, impressions and feelings. Away we go.
Astral Chain. In a nutshell, it's a brand new IP from the witches and wizards at Platinum Games, which holds great potential as a future franchise. But like the titular Chain, which throughout the game struggles to tame the extra-dimensional baddies, the Chimera, this installment struggles to tame a conflicted gameplay rhythm, dampened by hit-and-miss player experiences, into a coherent final product. A dichotomous mess to an extent, but on balance, to its credit, it thrills more than it frustrates. Before we get into the ins and outs of Astral Chain, I'll share with you a brief tale of woe which preceded its spot in my Switch library, and perhaps betrays a troublesome launch in the UK. So, I pre-ordered it from Amazon about a week before release, but was let down on launch day. Cue Rich and I trooping to our local game, which was completely sold out, and then a trip to Morrison's which proved entirely fruitless because it seems, bafflingly, they've withdrawn from the video game market altogether. Much to my chagrin, I conceded to buying a more expensive digital copy, which I dislike as a collector and enthusiast of physical releases, but that's another story altogether. Suffice to say, we had to run a bit of a gauntlet before we even got going. Talk about first world problems. First impressions were good. It opens strongly with an arcadey motorcycle chase, which does a lot to sell the fantastic cel-shaded visuals on offer here. It didn't let up after that either, as the combat system is neatly introduced during a dramatic sequence which also clues you in on the salient events of the story. The gist is, extra-dimensional beings, the Chimera, have invaded our reality with seemingly nefarious ends in sight for the human race. It's up to us, Neuron, a special task force put together by the police to keep the invading Chimera at bay, by using the Chimera against themselves. We tame the beast with our astral chains and energy leash of sorts and aim these biomechanical beasties back against their own kind. This leads into a Pokemon meets Bayonetta dynamic which informs the rest of the game. And combat is where the game truly shines. Our in-game counterpart wields a transformable weapon, the X-Baton, which becomes a heavy-duty sword, speedy baton, or rangy pistol at our whim. And each variant fosters a rock-paper-scissor relationship with different combat situations accordingly. But the real genius and cutting edge in battle is delivered by our legions, the aforementioned Chimera under our control. Hitting ZL launches our legion into enemies who proceed to devastate their opponents with a barrage of attacks to complement our own. Furthermore, sync attacks, a sort of tag team special move, are activated by context-sensitive button prompts. Sync attacks are not only hugely effective in battle, but they also look beautifully cinematic and provide a few frames of precious invincibility in which we as players can take stock and rally our reflexes for our next move. Our X-Baton and our Legion are not our only weapons, however. The Astral Chain itself can also be used to immobilize enemies, as we take direct control of the Legion, encircling enemies with a swoosh of the analog stick, priming our foes for a killer Legion barrage. And you can also use the momentum of enemy attacks against them by catching them amidst the chain between player and Legion and hauling them across the room with a satisfying elastic whip. It's all incredibly fun and exciting. These fundamentals alone create a hugely compelling and frenetic combat system which rarely fails to thrill. But as the game progresses and you unlock different Legion types with a plethora of unique attacks, skills and special abilities that you upgrade RPG style, your repertoire of offensive capabilities increases tenfold. After a relatively easy learning curve and the help of a training room, you're orchestrating lengthy combinations of synergistic Legion attacks with barely any downtime, amidst expertly timed dodges and sync attacks that make you look and feel like the king or queen of cool. First, you pop a shield with the Axe Legion, then stun a group of enemies with your Beast Legion, before encircling them with your Sword Legion, who proceeds to cut them to smithereens like a whirling dervish. And if that doesn't do the job, well, you can wear your Arm Legion like a set of power armor and proceed to batter them into submission with a Super Punch-Out style combo. You basically end up feeling like Neo from The Matrix, the one. The problem is, the combat is so involved that the game can't rely on that alone to see you through its 15 to 20 hour story. It would simply be too exhausting, which is why Platinum have worked in another mode of gameplay to serve up some welcome downtime in between Chimera whooping. Whether it's back at base and you're an HQ, or preceding the next combat portion in a new area, Astral Chain goes a bit Shenmue Yakuza, and by that I mean our hero or heroine's detective chops are brought to the fore. These sections usually involve questioning NPCs, the use of unique Legion abilities, and utilization of the helpful Iris interface, a sort of scanning facility with multiple functions. In doing so, you progress the story, complete optional side quests, and it generally ingratiates you with the world and characters of Astral Chain. And for the most part, these interludes are welcome and enjoyable. They do a successful job of getting you more attached to the incredibly quirky cast of characters Platinum have created. Toilet Fairy and Euron HQ mascot Lappy leading that quirkiness in style. And it's clear that the developers at Platinum really let their creative juices flow in the myriad mini-games that fill these sections of the game. And there are some real highlights here, ranging from tense stealth sections to cat rescues, ice cream deliveries, box balancing. The list goes on, and they rarely cease to amaze. In fact, some of my favourite experiences of the game have been during these sections, enjoying the creativity and charm that Platinum have poured into the game. The main issue is that these two modes of gameplay chop and change relatively erratically, so it's often a jarring adjustment from the player's perspective. Sometimes you're left craving for more after a particularly exciting section of combat, only to be thrust into the more sluggish pace of the investigation sections. Other times, you're absolutely spent battling your way through the astral plane, an abstract dimension you occasionally venture to rescue characters and chase down chimeras, only to have a similar assignment chucked your way to fulfill the requirements of the story missions. It's more of a pacing issue than anything else, I think, made worse by the linear structure of the game. But there is a fundamental discord between the two modes too, which runs deeper. Whereas the combat sections seem to rush you on at breakneck speeds, the investigation sections encourage and almost push exploration on you, whether you like it or not. Because of a grading system at the end of each chapter or file, you are conditioned to hit as many side activities as possible and incentivized to perform as well as you can in each activity. It's this push and pull between these two disparate moods of play which doesn't always marry up with player expectations, at least in my experience. The joy that comes with true open world experiences that bless you with the freedom to carve your own route through the game is therefore somewhat undercut here by the on-rails formula. The mini-games, side quests, are sometimes a bit hit and miss too. Some you barely break a sweat at, and others are so infuriatingly taxing that they culminate in a depressing grading that hits your bottom line at the end of each file. Completionists will likely enjoy chasing that 100% playthrough, but as a coherent experience, it definitely feels more than little uneven at times. I think the franchise might actually benefit from taking the next step to a more truly open world structure, something along the lines of Yakuza perhaps, that hands more freedom to the player in terms of how they go about their adventure. And I enjoy the grading system in terms of how you perform in combat. It essentially measures your style, a la Devil May Cry. But I think I'd prefer it dropping from the investigation activities. It labours the experience somewhat and detracts from the pure fun of some of the creative experiences on offer here. So, would I recommend Astral Chain? Well, I think it depends on what you like and how much patience you have. There is definitely a good game in here, but you have to grin and bear a few sections which don't reflect it at its best. But there was definitely moments during my playthrough where I was literally thinking to myself, well, this is a 9 out of 10 easy, only to have it knocked off its pedestal, all things considered. If you love stylish hack and slash games like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta, then the one-of-a-kind combat system is worth the price of entry alone. Just make sure to expect a significant change of pace in certain sections of the game. And if you're a fan of JRPGs, I think you'll also appreciate the craft and character that Platinum have imbued this title with, despite its shortcomings. And I can't believe I haven't mentioned it until now, but the music is fantastic and the presentation as a whole is top class. So for me, Astral Chain earns 8 out of 10. Now, Ninty, give Platinum the budget they deserve so they can turn this franchise into an open world epic.
So Tabz, you thinking 8 out of 10 for this one?
Yeah, mate, I think so. I think it feels fair. You know, as I said in the review, there's some ups and downs and inconsistencies throughout the kind of player experience, and but at the same time there are some fantastic highs. But what did you think, Rich? Because you know, we should just for the viewers, you got a certain amount of time to play with it, didn't you? Not a great deal, but
yeah. So
you had a little dabble.
The plan was that we were going to spend like 5 or 6 hours on the weekend we were together playing this, but because we were busy working on the Barcade project and various other bits and bobs, we didn't get as much time as we wanted. So we probably only spent 2 or 3 hours with it together, and we were taking turns playing. But
it took about 5 hours, didn't it, to find it and buy it?
Yeah, I mean that was ridiculous.
Help.
That I think there's a prime example of a game that maybe they thought, you know, this was a run-of-the-mill game. We'll just have a standard amount of games copies made. Probably, maybe the game stores thought the same, and then because it suddenly was getting these really fantastic reviews. Suddenly there's a big hype about it, everyone wants it, and then even the likes of Amazon couldn't fulfill the pre-orders, so that was an interesting take. But yeah, so
clearly an issue with supply and demand, wasn't there?
Oh yeah,
because you say it was just a bit of a sleeper hit almost that snuck up and caught the retailers by surprise. But I'm hoping it's selling well. I think it deserves to.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's the one thing. So with the few hours I'd spent with it, the one thing that I initially thought, first 10 minutes, is this is a bit of hack and slash, you know, a bit Devil May Cry, or a bit of a button basher. You know, it's felt like that. You know, just. But actually, in the few hours I spent with it following that, I soon realised that actually the combat system is one of the most complex I've seen for a long time. It really was, you know, there's so many different elements you can do, and actually just as we were sort of finishing up with my time on it, and you took it away and obviously completed it, it was really starting to move forward, different types of attack, different ways in which you can interact with the legions, to do attacks with them, without them. Yeah, really cool.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's all this kind of, I mentioned in my review, kind of a cross between, you know, Bayonetta and Pokemon or something like that, because the legions are where it comes into its own. It's a very unique combat experience. But yeah, I would definitely say that is one of the biggest highlights of this game, and also the charm and character in it, which I think you probably got a little bit of a sense of. We at least did a mission or two and got back to the Neuron HQ, which is kind of the
police
kind of
station.
Police HQ.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
I think,
and yeah, the characters just get bonkier and balmier, but in all the best ways.
Yeah.
So.
And it's so in on that like Japanese RPG style, isn't it? It's really stylized in that way, you know, with the graphics, with the music, the quirkiness of it. It's all very much in line with that.
Yeah, it's very JRPG, and you know, at the time, sometimes that can mean quite hammy and quite, you know, caricatured. But you know what? At the same time, some of the character building is quite subtle. Some of the way they handle the text and the way they, you know, convey and portray characters to you, it's not as in your face as you might expect. It's quite natural and. Yeah, it really does have a lot going for it in that respect as well. I mean, the story, obviously I won't offer any spoilers, but the story, it goes up and down. I mean, it keeps you kind of gripped to it to an extent, but I think they could do a better job if they have another go. I think the biggest thing for me is, you know, perhaps there is an element in this game of, again, it's another toe in the water job really, that this was a bit of an audition for a new IP, a new franchise for Platinum Games, and I really think it's succeeded in that audition. I think it deserves. I really hope Nintendo give them some sort of a license to create a sequel, but not just on the same blueprint. I think this game is begging to become a fully fledged open world epic, and I think that would just, you know, make the experience 10 times better. Because I think a lot of the inconsistencies I mentioned in my review, you know, and just in a nutshell, essentially it's to do with this constant kind of push and pull between, you know, the combat elements of the game and then the slower paced investigation sections of the game.
Well, it's really interesting because actually that's something you've mentioned, and that's a little almost a negative towards the game. Well, because of the amount of time I played with it, I didn't actually see any of that. So when I finished with the game and you went off back to yours, I thought, well, this is a 9 out of 10 all day, every day. But actually,
yeah, and no, there's definitely parts in it where you know, I literally, again, I said in the review, God, this is easy a 9 out of 10. You know,
yeah, exactly.
It's those kind of moments where, you know, I want to reach for the phone and start texting you and going, oh mate, I've just done this. You know, that kind of that Breath of the Wild sense of excitement we get when playing a game. You want to share how good it is with somebody else.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's definitely those moments in there, but unfortunately, it's not always up to that standard of experience.
But do you think taking it to open world would solve the pacing issues, because you could pace it how you saw fit rather than how the game saw fit?
Exactly, it just puts that freedom into the player's hands. I mean, that's obviously harder from a developer point of view because they have to, you know, create all that content that's accessible in a way that's freeform.
Yeah.
And also that usually means, you know, open world games require a lot bigger budget, a bigger timeline, you know, to develop. And this is why I think these are probably all reasons as to why I'd imagine the chap or the woman or the team that came up with this as a concept and a franchise probably had much more ambitious vision for it, but probably had to scale it down because of limitations in terms of budget.
Yeah.
And you know, they probably had a deadline to get it out. And of course that makes sense. A new franchise, Nintendo aren't just going to write a blank check and say, do what you want. You know, as good as Platinum Games are, you know, you've got to be business savvy. So I'm just hoping this has absolutely given Platinum Games the mandate to go, you know, Nintendo should really drop a load of money on them. And I'm thinking more like, I don't know if you played the Yakuza games, Rich.
No, I've not played them, no.
It's hard to describe. I mean, I think they kind of like spiritual successors to Shenmue, but then they take it in a very tongue-in-cheek, a lot more adult themes, and a kind of a bit more of a trashy throwaway perspective, but it's still got the kind of that open world sense. It's still got the kind of investigation detective elements to it, fighting that feels very much like, you know, it switches to almost like a 3D fighting game, that sort of sort of feel to it. So it does hit a lot of Shenmue style gameplay elements. But essentially, yeah, I feel like if they go in that direction with it, so you've got this big open world kind of you know, futuristic cityscape, and then you choose where you go in that world, you know, who you want to help on side quests at different points, and then obviously, you know, different directions as a main storyline that will take you off on these bigger, you know, missions, combat missions to push the story along. And I just think that would potentially solve a lot of these pacing issues, because the game, you know, you just feel a bit forced at times when you're loving the combat and you just want to keep doing that for a bit longer, and you're pushed into this investigation scenario.
Yeah.
And what makes that worse is that you've got this grading system where you're incentivized and you feel almost forced to hit as many of the investigations. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think you can just go make a beeline for the story, but you know, that will probably end up with you getting an overall rating of that chapter of the game, you know, like a D or worse. So for that reason, you kind of feel forced to, you know, do the game's bidding, if you like. It is what you need to do, what it's telling you to do. So it's a bit trapping in that sense.
So I guess what we would say as a conclusion is, great that Nintendo took the punt, dipped the toe in the water by helping fund this game, and it is definitely deserving of a sequel with a bigger budget and open world, and they're onto a winner there.
Oh, 100%. I'm thinking, mate, you know, Breath of the Wild proportions. If they get it right, they take all the time, which, you know, they've got the talent in Platinum, and they've got the, you know, the pedigree with Nintendo. It's got every opportunity to be an absolute 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 caliber of game.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to see where they go with it. And hopefully they can do a bit more with the cooperative element as well, because we didn't try that out, but apparently it's not as successful as some would have hoped, because
they've made it too. Did we read that they've made it too hard?
Yeah, almost. Essentially, I think you take a Joy-Con each. You have to split the Joy-Cons, and that also means that one is in charge of movement, and I think one is in charge of camera.
Oh wow, that's not the co-op I was expecting.
Yeah, exactly. Unless you're like Jedi levels of reflexes and in sync with the other person, I think it actually makes the game a lot harder and flow a lot more, you know, sluggishly, which, you know, that's why the combat is so cool, because it's so fluid and dynamic and exciting. So, and
fast as well.
Exactly, yeah. I think, like I say, there's an absolute shed load of potential in this game, and I just hope that Nintendo see that, and for, you know, I think it's selling pretty well, you know, and put the money down.
Brilliant. Cool.
Well, so should we wrap this one up, my friends?
Definitely. Well, I mean, very much liked by the channel, and definitely worth a play, I think, isn't it, Tabz?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I mean, you've just got to gauge it carefully in terms of what type of games you like, and perhaps, you know, if you're not sure on this one, wait for a sale.
Yes.
But if it looks like the kind of game that you're really interested in, you like the kind of hack and slash Devil May Cry, you like the JRPG style, you know, I think I'd say buy it in a heartbeat, because there's a really good experience in there.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you everybody for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you did, please give us a like, helps to support and grow the channel. If you didn't know, a dislike, but please drop us a comment just to let us know how we can improve, because feedback's always welcome. And yeah, if you like what you see from Rich and I, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and ring that bell for notifications. And I think that's probably about it. Another one for the archives.
Stamped and completed.